18 Deep Facts About Human Behavior in Psychology, Complete Expanded Guide Introduction. Understanding yourself is the key to everything. You know that feeling when you catch yourself doing something and think, wait, and am I the only one who does this? That exact moment when you realize maybe there's a real reason you always run late, or why you can't help but check your phone every 5 minutes, or why certain people drain you while others fill you up with energy. Here's the thing that might surprise you: you're not weird. You're not broken. And you're definitely not alone in these experiences. Human behavior, the way we think, act, and react to the world around us, follows patterns that psychologists have been studying for decades, even centuries. And some of these patterns are so universal, so deeply wired into our brains, which they show up in almost everyone, everywhere, in ways we don't even realize. Think about it for a moment. Every single day, you make thousands of decisions. You interact with dozens of people. You feel hundreds of emotions. You think thousands of thoughts. And most of this happens automatically, without you even being aware of it. Your brain is running programs in the background, programs that were installed years ago, some even before you could talk or walk. These programs determine how you see yourself, how you relate to others, how you handle stress, how you make decisions, and how you navigate through life. Today, we're diving deep into 25 fascinating facts about human behavior that will make you look at yourself and the people around you in a completely different light. These aren't just random trivia or interesting facts you forget in 5 minutes. These are profound insights that explain why you do what you do, why you feel what you feel, and why understanding these patterns might just change the way you navigate your relationships, your work, and your entire life. Before we begin, I want you to understand something important. As you read through these facts, some of them might make you uncomfortable. Some might challenge beliefs you've held your whole life. Some might make you realize things about yourself that you've been avoiding. And that's okay. Actually, that's more than okay, that's the whole point. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. Real change, real understanding, comes when you're willing to look at yourself honestly, without judgment, and say, okay, this is where I am, and this is where I want to go. So take a deep breath. Get comfortable. And let's explore what makes us human. Fact number 1, the truth about lying: we all do it more than we think. Let's start with something you probably do every single day without even thinking about it: lying. Now, before you close this article and protest saying you're not a liar, hear me out. The average person lies between 10 to 200 times a day. Yes, you read that correctly. 10 to 200 times. Every single day. But here's what's important to understand: most of these aren't big, malicious lies. They're not the kind of lies that destroy relationships or get people in serious trouble. They're those tiny social lies we tell to keep the peace, to avoid awkwardness, to protect someone's feelings, to make social interaction smoother. Let me give you some examples you'll probably recognize. You tell your friend their new haircut looks great when you're honestly not sure it does. You say you're 5 minutes away when you haven't even left your house yet. You tell your boss you're feeling fine when you're actually exhausted and overwhelmed. You say, I'd love to come to your party, when you're already dreading it. You tell someone, we should hang out sometime, when you have no intention of making plans. You say, I'm busy, instead of, I don't want to. These micro-lies are so embedded in social interaction that we don't even register them as dishonesty anymore. They've become automatic, reflexive, almost like breathing. We do it without thinking because somewhere along the way, we learned that complete honesty, all the time, in every situation, causes problems. It creates conflict. It hurts feelings. It makes social situations awkward and uncomfortable. So instead, we developed this complex system of social lies, white lies, and polite lies. They're survival mechanisms, ways we navigate the complex web of human relationships without constant conflict. In many cultures, these kinds of lies are not just accepted, they're expected. They're considered good manners, social grace, and emotional intelligence. But here's what's really interesting from a psychological perspective: the frequency and type of lies you tell can actually reveal a lot about your personality, your insecurities, and how you were taught to handle uncomfortable truths as a child. Think about your childhood for a moment. What happened when you told the truth? Were you praised for honesty, even when the truth was difficult? Or were you punished, yelled at, made to feel bad? If you grew up in an environment where honesty was punished, where expressing your real feelings meant rejection or anger, where telling the truth got you in trouble more often than lying did, you might have learned that lying, even in small ways, keeps you safe. For example, if you told your parents you didn't like the food they cooked and they got angry, you learned to say, it's delicious, even when it wasn't. If you told them you didn't want to hug a relative and they scolded you for being rude, you learned to hide your discomfort. If you expressed that you were sad or scared and they told you to stop being dramatic, you learned to say, I'm fine, even when you weren't. These patterns, once formed in childhood, become automatic. They become your default way of operating in the world. And as an adult, you might find yourself lying in situations where you don't even need to, where honesty would actually be fine, but the old programming kicks in automatically. The interesting thing is that most people are completely unaware of how often they lie. They think of themselves as honest people, and in the big, important ways, they are. But all those small, daily lies? They don't even count them. The brain has categorized them as not real lies because the intention isn't to harm or deceive in a serious way. However, there's a cost to all this lying, even the small stuff. When you consistently tell small lies, you start to lose touch with your own truth. You become unsure of what you really think, what you really feel, what you really want. You've spent so much time saying what others want to hear, what's socially acceptable, what keeps the peace, that your authentic voice gets buried deeper and deeper. Moreover, all these small lies create a kind of low-level anxiety. Part of you always has to remember what you said to whom, has to keep track of the different versions of yourself you're presenting to different people. It's exhausting, even if you don't consciously realize it. So what's the solution? The goal isn't to become brutally honest about everything, all the time. That would cause its own problems. The goal is awareness. Start noticing when you're lying, even in small ways. Ask yourself why. What are you afraid will happen if you tell the truth? What are you trying to avoid? Sometimes, you'll realize the lie is necessary and appropriate. Other times, you'll realize you're lying out of habit, out of old programming, and that the truth would actually be fine. You might discover that the people in your life can handle your honesty better than you think. You might find that being more truthful, more authentic, actually deepens your relationships rather than damaging them. The key is choice. When you're aware of your patterns, you can choose. You can decide when a social lie is appropriate and when it's time to speak your truth. And that awareness, that ability to choose, is what real freedom looks like. Fact number 2, swearing and honesty, the surprising connection. Now, let's talk about something that might surprise you, especially if you've been taught that swearing is bad, unprofessional, or a sign of poor character. People who swear often are usually more honest. Yes, you read that right. Multiple scientific studies have shown that people who curse regularly tend to be more genuine, more direct, and less likely to engage in serious deception. This finding goes against what many of us were taught growing up. We were told that nice people don't swear, that cursing is rude, that it shows a lack of vocabulary or intelligence. But research tells a different story. Why is there this connection between swearing and honesty? Because swearing is often a sign of emotional authenticity. When you swear, you're not filtering. You're not polishing your words to sound more acceptable. You're not carefully choosing each word to present yourself in the best possible light. You're expressing exactly what you feel in that moment, raw and unfiltered. Think about when people swear. It's usually in moments of strong emotion, frustration, anger, excitement, surprise. These are moments when the usual social filters come down, when the socially acceptable version of yourself takes a back seat and the real you comes forward. And in those moments, what comes out is typically more honest, more true to what the person is actually experiencing. On the other hand, people who are constantly watching their language, constantly moderating every word that comes out of their mouth, are also more likely to be moderating their truth. They're so focused on how they're being perceived, on saying the right thing, that authenticity often gets lost in the process. Now, this doesn't mean you should start cursing in every conversation to prove you're honest. That's not the point. Context matters. There are times and places where swearing is inappropriate: job interviews, formal presentations, conversations with children, interactions with people who've expressed that it bothers them. Being emotionally authentic doesn't mean ignoring social context or other people's boundaries. But what this research does suggest is that those raw, unfiltered moments when a curse word slips out are often the moments when someone is being their most real self. It's a moment when the mask comes off, even if just for a second. If you've ever felt guilty about swearing, if you've internalized shame around using those words, maybe it's worth examining where that shame came from. Was it from parents who punished you for it? Teachers who told you it was wrong? Religious teachings that said it was sinful? Cultural messages that said proper people don't talk that way? And here's the deeper question: is that shame serving you, or is it just making you hide parts of yourself that are perfectly human? Is it helping you be a better person, or is it just making you feel bad about natural emotional expression? For many people, the shame around swearing is really shame about strong emotions. They were taught that anger is bad, that frustration should be hidden, that you should always be calm and composed. Swearing became a proxy for all those unacceptable feelings. So when they swear, they're not just breaking a language rule, they're expressing emotions they were taught to suppress. Understanding this connection can be freeing. It means that your occasional F-bomb isn't a moral failing. It's not a sign of low intelligence or poor character. It's often just honesty breaking through, emotions expressing themselves in the most direct way possible. Of course, like anything, balance is important. Someone who swears constantly, in every sentence, might be dealing with poor emotional regulation or might have simply made it a habit. But the occasional curse word, especially in moments of genuine emotion, is often a sign of someone who's comfortable with their authentic self, who isn't trying to present a perfectly polished image all the time. The broader lesson here is about authenticity versus social performance. We all perform to some degree, we have to in order to function in society. But when that performance becomes so constant, so all-consuming, that you lose touch with your real self, that's when problems arise. And swearing, ironically, can be a small window into someone's authentic self, a moment when the performance drops and the real person shows up. So the next time you catch yourself swearing, instead of feeling guilty, maybe just notice it. What were you feeling in that moment? What truth was trying to come out? And if you never swear, if you've completely eliminated those words from your vocabulary, maybe ask yourself why. Is it a genuine choice based on your values, or is it rooted in shame and fear of showing your real emotions? Fact number 3, talking to yourself is actually a sign of intelligence. Here's another one that might hit close to home. Talking to yourself isn't a sign of madness. It's actually a sign of intelligence. If you've ever caught yourself having full conversations in your head, or even out loud when you're alone, and felt a little embarrassed about it, let me ease your mind right now. Self-talk is one of the most powerful cognitive tools humans have. It's not a quirk or a weird habit, it's a sophisticated mental process that highly intelligent people use constantly. When you talk through a problem out loud, when you narrate what you're doing, you're actually engaging multiple areas of your brain simultaneously. This multisensory engagement helps with focus, memory, problem solving, and understanding. It's like your brain is processing information through different channels at once, which creates stronger neural connections and deeper understanding. Let me give you some examples of how this works in real life. Athletes use self-talk before competitions. They literally tell themselves, "You've got this, stay focused, remember your training." Surgeons talk themselves through complex procedures, verbalizing each step to maintain concentration and accuracy. Writers talk through sentences when they're stuck, hearing how the words sound together. Mathematicians narrate their problem-solving process. Programmers explain their code to themselves, or to a rubber duck, in a famous programming technique, to catch errors and clarify logic. This isn't weird, it's effective. It's one of the ways our brains make sense of complex information and maintain focus in challenging situations. But self-talk isn't just about problem-solving. It's also about self-regulation and emotional processing. The way you talk to yourself reveals everything about your internal world, about the relationship you have with yourself. Pay attention to your self-talk for a moment. What do you say to yourself throughout the day? When you make a mistake, what's your internal response? When you're facing a challenge, what does your inner voice say? For many people, self-talk is harsh, critical, constantly pointing out mistakes and flaws. You're so stupid. Why can't you get anything right? Of course you failed, what did you expect? Everyone else can do this, why can't you? You'll never be good enough. If this sounds familiar, if your inner voice is mean and judgmental, I want you to understand something crucial: that's not your real voice. That's a learned pattern, probably from childhood, probably from voices that told you that you weren't good enough. Maybe it was a parent who criticized constantly. Maybe it was a teacher who focused on mistakes rather than progress. Maybe it was bullies who made you feel small. Maybe it was a culture that valued perfection over growth. Whatever the source, you internalized those external voices. You made them your own. And now they run automatically, without you even questioning whether they're true or helpful. But here's the powerful truth: self-talk can be changed. You can literally rewire your brain by choosing different words, kinder words, when you speak to yourself. This isn't just positive thinking or empty affirmations. This is about treating yourself with the same compassion you'd show a good friend. Think about it. If your friend came to you and said they made a mistake, would you say, "You're so stupid, you always mess everything up"? Of course not. You'd probably say something like, "It's okay, everyone makes mistakes. What can you learn from this? How can I help?" So why don't we talk to ourselves that way? Why is it so easy to be compassionate to others but so hard to extend that same compassion to ourselves? The answer usually lies in our early experiences. If the adults around us were harsh and critical, we learned that's how you're supposed to talk to yourself. We learned that being hard on yourself is how you improve, how you stay motivated, how you avoid becoming lazy or complacent. But research shows the opposite is true. Self-compassion, not self-criticism, is what actually drives lasting change and growth. When you're kind to yourself, when you treat your mistakes as learning opportunities rather than proof of worthlessness, you're more likely to try new things, take healthy risks, and persist through challenges. Negative self-talk, on the other hand, creates anxiety, depression, and paralysis. When your inner voice is constantly berating you, you become afraid to try anything because you know you'll beat yourself up if it doesn't go perfectly. You play it safe. You stay small. You avoid challenges because failure means facing that harsh internal judge. So if you catch yourself engaging in negative self-talk, here's what to do. First, just notice it. Don't judge yourself for it, that's just more negative self-talk. Just notice it with curiosity. Oh, there's that critical voice again. Then, ask yourself, would I say this to a friend? If the answer is no, then it's not a truth you need to accept. It's just an old pattern running. Finally, consciously choose different words. Not fake positive ones that you don't believe, but gentler, more realistic ones. Instead of, I'm so stupid, try, I made a mistake, but I can learn from this. Instead of, I'll never be good enough, try, I'm doing my best, and that's enough. Instead of, everyone else has it figured out, try, everyone struggles sometimes, including me, and that's okay. This isn't about lying to yourself or pretending everything is perfect. It's about treating yourself with basic human kindness. It's about speaking to yourself the way you'd speak to someone you love. And if you're already someone who practices positive self-talk, keep going. You're doing something that most people never learn to do. You're being your own best friend instead of your own worst critic. And that one shift, that one choice to be kind to yourself in your own mind, can change everything. Fact number 4, messy handwriting and active minds. Let's shift gears to something visual and perhaps a bit surprising. People with messy handwriting often have incredibly active minds. You know those people whose notes look like a tornado went through their notebook? The ones whose handwriting is barely legible, with letters running into each other and words going in all directions? They're not careless. They're not lazy. And they're definitely not stupid. Their brains are just moving faster than their hands can keep up with. Messy handwriting is frequently associated with high intelligence and creativity. This connection has been observed by researchers, teachers, and psychologists for decades. But why does this connection exist? The reason is actually quite simple when you think about it. When someone is writing by hand, there are two processes happening simultaneously. First, there's the cognitive process, thinking, generating ideas, making connections, analyzing information. Second, there's the physical process, the actual movement of hand and pen across paper. For someone with a highly active mind, the cognitive process is happening at lightning speed. Ideas are flowing fast. Connections are being made. Concepts are forming and transforming. The person is so focused on the ideas, on the concepts, on the connections they're making, that the physical act of writing becomes secondary, almost an afterthought. Their hand is essentially trying to keep up with a brain that's running at full speed. And sometimes, it just can't. Letters get shortened. Words get scribbled. The writing becomes a kind of shorthand that makes sense to the writer in the moment but might be illegible to others, or even to themselves later. Compare this to someone whose handwriting is always perfectly neat and controlled. This doesn't mean their mind is slow, not at all. But it might mean that they're processing information differently. Perhaps they're more methodical, taking time with each word. Perhaps they've trained themselves to slow down their thinking to match their writing speed. Perhaps neat handwriting is important to them for aesthetic or practical reasons, so they prioritize it. Neither approach is better or worse. They're just different. But what's important to understand is that messy handwriting is not a character flaw. It's not a sign of carelessness or lack of effort. In many cases, it's actually a sign of a mind that's moving at extraordinary speeds, processing vast amounts of information, making complex connections. Think about some of history's greatest minds. Albert Einstein had notoriously messy handwriting. So did many famous writers, scientists, and inventors. These weren't people who lacked attention to detail in their work, quite the opposite. But when it came to the physical act of writing, the ideas took precedence over the appearance. Now, if you're someone who's been judged for messy handwriting, if teachers marked you down for it, if you were made to feel less capable because your letters didn't look perfect, I want you to understand something. Your worth as a thinker, as a student, as a person, has nothing to do with how pretty your handwriting is. What matters is the content of your thoughts, not their physical presentation. What matters is the depth of your ideas, not whether they're written in perfect script. What matters is what you're saying, not how aesthetically pleasing it looks on the page. Of course, in some contexts, legibility matters. If you're writing something that others need to read, a note, a form, a letter, then making it readable is considerate and practical. But the speed at which your brain processes information, the way you think, and the value of your ideas, none of that should be judged by handwriting. In fact, this is part of a larger issue about how we value different types of intelligence. Our education system, and society in general, often values certain visible markers of intelligence: neat handwriting, organized notebooks, sitting still, following instructions precisely. But these markers don't actually measure intelligence or creativity. They measure compliance, motor control, and attention to physical details. A person with messy handwriting might be brilliant at abstract thinking, problem-solving, creative innovation, and making connections between disparate ideas, all things that don't show up in how neat their notes look. So if you have messy handwriting, embrace it. Understand what it might be telling you about how your brain works. You're not defective. You're not careless. Your brain is just operating at a frequency that makes perfect penmanship irrelevant compared to the ideas flowing through your mind. And if you have neat handwriting, that's wonderful too. But don't assume it makes you better or more intelligent. It's just a different way of operating, a different balance between cognitive speed and physical execution. The broader lesson here is about not judging people, or yourself, based on superficial markers. Intelligence comes in many forms. Capability shows up in many ways. And sometimes, the messiest notebook contains the most brilliant ideas. Fact number 5, night owls, intelligence, and creativity. Here's something about your sleep schedule that might explain a lot and hopefully make you feel better about your natural rhythms. People who stay up late are more likely to be intelligent, creative, and have higher IQs. Night owls have been pathologies for so long. They've been labeled as lazy, undisciplined, and unmotivated. Society has created this narrative that waking up early is virtuous and staying up late is a character flaw. Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, right? But science tells a completely different story. Staying up late is linked to novelty-seeking behavior, to thinking outside conventional patterns, to questioning norms rather than blindly following them. It's associated with higher creativity, better problem-solving abilities, and yes, higher intelligence. Let me explain why this connection exists from an evolutionary perspective. Throughout human history, someone needed to stay awake while everyone else slept. These were the guardians, the watchers, the ones who kept the fire going and watched for predators. But more than that, these were the people whose minds wouldn't turn off just because the sun went down. These nighttime thinkers were essential to human survival and innovation. While everyone else slept according to the sun's schedule, these individuals were processing information, solving problems, creating new ideas. They were thinking differently because they were operating differently. In modern times, this trait continues. Night owls tend to be the innovators, the artists, the deep thinkers, the ones who come up with unconventional solutions. They're the programmers coding through the night, the writers finding their voice in the quiet hours, the scientists making breakthrough discoveries when the rest of the world sleeps. But our society is built for morning people. School starts at 8 a.m. Work starts at 9 a.m. Everything important happens in the morning. And night owls spend their entire lives being told they need to change, need to adjust, need to force themselves into a schedule that doesn't match their natural biology. If you're a night owl, you've probably tried countless times to become a morning person. You've set alarms. You've gone to bed early. You've read all the advice about sleep hygiene. And maybe you've managed to force yourself to function on an early schedule. But at what cost? Forcing yourself to function on a schedule that doesn't match your biology creates chronic stress. Your body is constantly fighting against its natural rhythm. You're always tired, always struggling, always feeling like you're swimming against the current. You judge yourself as lazy or undisciplined when really, you're just trying to operate against your fundamental nature. Imagine telling a morning person they have to stay up until 3 a.m. every night and sleep until noon. They'd struggle immensely. Their productivity would plummet. They'd feel awful. But we don't ask that of morning people. We only ask night owls to completely reverse their natural tendencies. Here's what the research actually shows: your chorotype, whether you're a morning person or a night person, is largely genetic. It's not a choice. It's not about discipline or willpower. It's about how your biological clock is wired. Some people's brains naturally produce melatonin earlier in the evening, making them tired and ready for sleep. Other people's brains don't produce melatonin until much later, keeping them alert and active into the night. Neither is better. Neither is worse. They're just different. But we've built a society that favors one and punishes the other. The good news is that this is slowly changing. More research is emerging about chorotypes. More employers are offering flexible schedules. More people are recognizing that productivity doesn't require everyone to follow the same 9 to 5 schedule. If you're a night owl, here's what I want you to understand: your brain isn't broken. It's just wired differently. And forcing yourself to function on a schedule that doesn't match your biology isn't just uncomfortable, it's actually harmful to your health, your mental well-being, and your productivity. If you have the privilege of being able to adjust your schedule to match your natural rhythm, do it. Work at night if that's when you're most productive. Sleep in the morning if that's when your body wants to rest. Give yourself permission to operate according to your own biology rather than society's expectations. And if you don't have that privilege, if your job or life circumstances require you to maintain an early schedule, at least stop judging yourself. Stop calling yourself lazy. Stop feeling guilty about hitting snooze. Understand that you're working against your natural biology, and give yourself credit for managing to do it. The broader lesson here is about honoring your natural tendencies rather than forcing yourself into molds that don't fit. This applies to more than just sleep schedules. It applies to how you learn, how you work, how you socialize, how you process emotions. The more you can align your life with your authentic nature, the better you'll feel and the more effective you'll be. Society might tell you there's one right way to be. But your biology, your personality, your individual makeup might require something completely different. And that's not just okay, it's perfect. You're designed exactly the way you're meant to be. Fact number 6, the myth of multitasking. Now, let's talk about something that almost everyone does and almost no one does well, multitasking. Here's a truth that might be hard to hear: multitasking doesn't make you efficient. It actually makes you less productive, less effective, and more error-prone. The human brain isn't designed to focus on multiple complex tasks simultaneously. This is a neuroscience fact, not an opinion. What we call multitasking is actually task switching, rapidly moving our attention from one thing to another and back again. And here's the problem: every time you switch from one task to another, your brain has to reorient. It has to stop what it was doing, shift gears, load new information, and start fresh. This switching cost adds up quickly. Studies show that multitasking can reduce productivity by up to 40%. That's almost half your effectiveness gone because you're trying to do too many things at once. Imagine trying to read this article while also responding to text messages, watching TV, and eating lunch. You might think you're doing all 4 things at once, but really, you're giving each activity only a fraction of your attention. You're missing details in the article, sending incomplete texts, not really watching the TV show, and barely tasting your food. You're doing everything, but nothing well. But here's why we keep doing it despite the evidence: multitasking feels productive. It gives us the illusion of being busy, of getting things done. And in a culture that worships busyness, that equates being busy with being valuable, that feeling becomes addictive. Think about how we glorify multitasking. We call people who juggle multiple tasks skilled and efficient. We put excellent multitasker on our resumes as if it's a strength. We take pride in handling 10 things at once, in being the person everyone can rely on to manage everything simultaneously. But the reality is quite different. When researchers study people who claim to be excellent multitaskers, they consistently find that these people are actually worse at multitasking than those who don't claim this skill. They're less able to filter out irrelevant information. They're more easily distracted. They're slower to switch between tasks. But they feel like they're good at it, so they keep doing it. This disconnect happens because multitasking creates a sense of urgency and stimulation that feels like productivity. Your brain gets little dopamine hits every time you switch tasks, every time you check a notification, every time you start something new. This feels rewarding in the moment, even though you're not actually accomplishing more. In fact, constantly switching between tasks creates what psychologists call attention residue. When you move from task A to task B, part of your attention remains stuck thinking about task A. So you're never fully present with task B, which reduces the quality of your work and increases the time it takes to complete. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine you're writing an important email. Halfway through, you get a text message and respond to it. Then you see a notification about a meeting and check your calendar. Then you remember something you need to add to your to-do list and write it down. Then you return to your email. You might think this whole process took just 2 minutes. But research shows that after each interruption, it can take 15 to 20 minutes to fully return to the same level of focus you had before. So those quick interruptions just turned a 10-minute email into a 30-minute project, and the quality probably suffered because your brain never achieved deep focus. Now, I need to clarify something. There's a difference between multitasking and doing routine activities simultaneously. Walking while talking on the phone isn't really multitasking because walking is automatic, your brain doesn't need focused attention for it. Listening to music while exercising is fine because neither task requires complex cognitive processing. The problems arise when you try to do multiple things that require focused attention and cognitive processing. Writing an email while in a meeting. Studying while watching a show. having a serious conversation while scrolling through your phone. These combinations split your attention in ways that reduce effectiveness for both tasks. So what's the alternative? Single tasking. Giving one thing your complete, undivided attention until it's done or until you reach a natural stopping point. Then, and only then, moving to the next thing. This feels counterintuitive in our fast-paced world. It feels slow. It feels like you're not doing enough. But the research is clear: doing one thing fully, with complete attention, will always yield better results than doing 5 things poorly. Here's a challenge: try single tasking for just one day. When you're in a conversation, just have the conversation, no phone checking. When you're eating, just eat, no screens. When you're working on a project, just work on that project, no email, no messages, no other tasks. Most people who try this are shocked by 2 things. First, how hard it is. We've trained ourselves to constantly divide our attention, and breaking that habit is difficult. Second, how much more they accomplish. When you give something your full attention, you work faster, make fewer mistakes, and produce higher quality results. The irony is that single tasking actually makes you more productive than multitasking, even though it feels slower. You finish things completely. You don't have to go back and fix errors. You don't lose time to constant task switching. You get into a state of flow where work feels easier and more enjoyable. So if you're someone who prides yourself on being able to juggle 10 things at once, I want you to ask yourself honestly, are you really doing all those things well? Or are you just doing all of them halfway? Because doing one thing fully will always beat doing 5 things partially. And if you're someone who's always felt behind, always felt like you can't keep up with people who seem to handle everything at once, maybe the problem isn't you. Maybe those people aren't actually handling everything as well as it appears. Maybe they're scattered, stressed, and producing mediocre work. And maybe your approach of focusing on one thing at a time is actually superior, even if it looks slower on the surface. Fact number 7, the science of attraction: your pupils tell the truth. Let's talk about a behavior that feels deeply personal and reveals something fascinating about human biology. When you're attracted to someone, your pupils dilate. This isn't something you can control. It's not something you can fake or hide. It's an automatic physiological response that happens without your conscious awareness. When you look at someone you find attractive, your pupils expand to take in more of them, to see them more clearly. This happens in milliseconds. Your brain registers attraction, sends signals to your nervous system, and your pupils respond immediately. It's one of the most honest reactions your body can have because it bypasses all your mental filters and defenses. And here's the really wild part: other people can sense this, even if they don't consciously realize it. Dilated pupils make you appear more attractive to others because they signal interest, openness, and warmth. It's one of those microsignals that humans pick up on without knowing why. Think about it. When someone is attracted to you, when they're genuinely interested and engaged, their eyes seem to light up when they look at you. That's not poetic language, that's literally their pupils dilating. And your brain, evolved over thousands of years to read subtle social cues, picks up on the signal even if you couldn't articulate what you're noticing. This is why eye contact is so powerful in human connection. When 2 people lock eyes and both are feeling attraction, both sets of pupils dilate simultaneously. There's this moment of biological synchronicity, this primal recognition happening beneath the level of conscious thought. Your bodies know before your minds fully process what's happening. Researchers have studied this phenomenon extensively. In one famous study, participants were shown photos of faces, some with naturally dilated pupils and some with constricted pupils, digitally altered. Overwhelmingly, people rated the faces with dilated pupils as more attractive, more trustworthy, and more appealing, even though they couldn't identify what was different about the images. This pupil dilation happens not just with romantic attraction but with any form of intense interest or engagement. When you're excited about an idea, when you're deeply engaged in a conversation, when you're looking at something you love, your pupils dilate. It's a window into your genuine interest and emotional state. The opposite is also true. When someone is disinterested, uncomfortable, or experiencing negative emotions, their pupils constrict. This is part of why you can sometimes tell when someone isn't really listening to you or isn't genuinely interested in the conversation, even if they're saying all the right words. Their eyes give them away. In practical terms, this means that your body is constantly broadcasting your true feelings through signals you can't control. You might be able to manage your words, your facial expressions, even your tone of voice. But your pupils? They're honest every single time. This can feel vulnerable when you think about it. It means that when you're attracted to someone, when you're interested, when you're excited, your body is showing it whether you want it to or not. For people who like to maintain control, who are careful about revealing their feelings, this automatic response can feel exposing. But it's also beautiful in a way. It means that genuine attraction, real interest, true connection, these things can't be faked. Your body tells the truth even when your words might not. And in a world where people are often performing, where interactions can feel calculated and strategic, these unconscious biological responses remind us that we're still animals at our core, responding to each other in ways that go beyond thought and intention. So the next time you're talking to someone and you feel that spark, that connection, pay attention to their eyes. Not just what they're saying with their words, but what their pupils are revealing. And be aware that your own eyes are doing the same, broadcasting your interest and attraction in a language older than words. Fact number 8, choice paralysis, why too many options leave you stuck. Here's something about decision-making that might frustrate you but will definitely feel familiar. When you're faced with too many options, you're more likely to make no decision at all. This phenomenon is called choice paralysis or decision paralysis, and it's become increasingly common in our modern world of unlimited options. This is why scrolling through Netflix for 30 minutes trying to pick a movie often ends with you giving up and watching nothing. It's why standing in front of a wall of 50 different cereals at the grocery store can leave you feeling overwhelmed and confused. It's why having 100 potential matches on a dating app can make it harder, not easier, to actually connect with someone. The human brain can only process so much information before it starts to shut down. We have what psychologists call a cognitive bandwidth, a limit to how much information we can actively consider at once. When you're presented with too many choices, you exceed that bandwidth, and your brain essentially says, nope, too much, and checks out. Let me break down what happens neurologically when you face too many options. First, your brain tries to evaluate each option, comparing features, weighing pros and cons, considering outcomes. With 2 or 3 options, this is manageable. With 20 options, it becomes overwhelming. Your brain is working overtime, burning through mental energy, and still not making progress toward a decision. Second, there's the fear of making the wrong choice. With more options comes more opportunity for regret. If you have 2 options and pick one, you're only wondering about one alternative. If you have 50 options and pick one, you're left wondering about 49 alternatives. Did you miss something better? Would a different choice have been perfect? This fear of missing out, of making the suboptimal choice, can be paralyzing. Third, there's the question of how to even compare so many options. With 2 options, you can compare them directly. With dozens of options, you need some system for evaluation, some way to narrow things down. But what criteria should you use? What factors matter most? Just figuring out how to make the decision becomes a decision in itself. The result? Decision paralysis. You freeze. You scroll endlessly. You read review after review. You ask friends for advice. You create pros and cons lists. And still, you can't decide. So often, you end up making no decision at all, or you make a decision but feel unsatisfied with it because you're haunted by all those other possibilities. Psychologist Barry Schwartz wrote a famous book about this called The Paradox of Choice. His research shows that having more choices actually makes us less happy, less satisfied, and more anxious. We think we want unlimited options, but our brains aren't designed to handle them. Ironically, having more choices makes you less satisfied with whatever you eventually choose. With 2 options, if you pick one and it's good, you're happy. With 50 options, even if you pick a good one, you're left wondering if one of the other 49 would have been better. You can't fully enjoy your choice because you're too busy imagining the alternatives. This applies to everything: what to watch, what to eat, what to buy, where to live, what career to pursue, who to date. The abundance of modern life, which should make us happier, often makes us more stressed and less satisfied. Think about it in your own life. When have you been most satisfied with a decision? Often, it's when you had limited options and just picked the best one available. When you had one clear choice that made sense, you probably felt good about it. But when you had countless options, even getting a good outcome probably felt less satisfying because you kept wondering about the others. So what's the solution? How do you make decisions when faced with too many options? First, understand that this is a biological limit, not a personal failing. If you feel paralyzed by too many choices, you're not weak or indecisive. You're human. Your brain is doing the best it can with an overload of information it was never designed to handle. Second, intentionally limit your options. Instead of considering all 50 cereals, narrow it down to 3 based on simple criteria: price, ingredients, and preference. Instead of scrolling through every movie on Netflix, pick from your top 3 categories or ask a friend for one specific recommendation. Instead of swiping through hundreds of dating profiles, focus deeply on just a few that seem genuinely compatible. Third, accept that there is no perfect choice. This is crucial. You're not looking for the absolute best option out of millions. You're looking for a good option that meets your needs. Good enough is actually good enough. The search for perfect is what keeps you stuck. Fourth, make decisions faster and second-guess them less. Once you've made a choice, commit to it. Stop looking at alternatives. Stop wondering if something else would have been better. Engage fully with the choice you made. This is how you find satisfaction, not by picking the objectively perfect option, which probably doesn't exist, but by fully committing to and appreciating the option you chose. Fifth, recognize that the ability to choose is a privilege, but so is the ability to let go of needing to evaluate every possible option. Some of the happiest people are those who make quick decisions based on simple criteria and then move forward without regret. The broader lesson here is about living in a world of abundance. We have more choices than any generation in human history. This is, in many ways, wonderful. But it also creates new challenges that our brains aren't naturally equipped to handle. Understanding these challenges, recognizing when choice overload is happening, and developing strategies to manage it, these skills are becoming essential for mental health and life satisfaction in the modern world. Fact number 9, people remember how you made them feel. Let's dive into something fundamental about human connection. People tend to forget what you said, forget what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. This is one of the most important truths about human psychology, and it changes everything about how we think about relationships, communication, and influence. We are emotional creatures first, logical creatures second. Our brains evolved to prioritize emotional information over factual information because, from a survival perspective, knowing how someone makes us feel is more important than remembering exactly what they said. Think about the people in your life who've had the biggest impact on you. Can you remember every conversation you had with them? Probably not. Can you remember specific things they did? Maybe a few moments. But you can definitely remember how they made you feel. Did they make you feel safe? Valued? Seen? Understood? Judged? Anxious? Small? Those feelings stay with you long after the details fade. This is why you can say all the right words, do all the right things, but if the feeling underneath those actions is cold, distant, manipulative, or insincere, people will sense it and they'll remember it. They might not be able to articulate what was off. They might not consciously realize what they're picking up on. But they'll walk away from the interaction feeling bad, and that feeling will stick. On the flip side, you can stumble over your words, make mistakes, do everything imperfectly, but if you make someone feel seen, heard, valued, and safe, they will remember you forever. They'll remember how it felt to be in your presence, how you made them feel like they mattered, how they could be themselves around you. This is why some people stay in your heart years after you've lost touch, even if you only knew them briefly. It's why certain teachers, mentors, or friends have such lasting impact. They made you feel something important, something that touched you at a deep level. And it's also why other people fade from memory even though you saw them every day. They were present physically, but they never made you feel anything meaningful. Let me give you some examples of how this plays out in real life. Imagine two managers. Manager A always says the right things. She gives positive feedback, hosts team meetings, and follows all the HR guidelines. But when you talk to her, you feel like you're being assessed, like she's calculating how useful you are to her. There's no warmth, no genuine interest in you as a person. When you walk away from interactions with her, you feel a bit hollow, a bit used. Manager B might be less polished. She sometimes forgets meeting times, occasionally gives feedback that's awkwardly phrased. But when you talk to her, you feel like she really sees you. She asks about your life and actually listens to the answer. She celebrates your wins like they're her own. She creates a sense of safety where you can admit mistakes and ask for help. When you walk away from interactions with her, you feel energized and valued. Years later, you'll barely remember what either manager said in meetings. But you'll remember exactly how each one made you feel. And that feeling will shape whether you remember them fondly or not. Or think about relationships. You might have had a partner who did everything right, remembered anniversaries, gave gifts, said, "I love you," regularly. But somehow, you felt lonely in the relationship. Something was missing. You felt like you were with someone who was performing love rather than feeling it. That emotional emptiness, that feeling of not being truly seen or cherished, that stays with you. Contrast that with someone who might have been less conventionally good at relationship stuff, but who made you feel deeply loved. Who looked at you in a way that made you feel seen. Who held space for your emotions without trying to fix them. Who showed up consistently in ways that made you feel safe and valued. Those feelings become the foundation of connection that lasts. This principle applies everywhere, in parenting, teaching, leadership, friendship, romance, customer service. Everywhere humans interact, the emotional experience matters more than the specific content of what was said or done. So what does this mean practically? First, it means that if you want to matter to people, if you want to create real connections, focus less on being perfect and more on being present. Presence, true, genuine presence where you're fully engaged with the person in front of you, is the most powerful gift you can give anyone. What does true presence look like? It means putting your phone away during conversations. It means listening not just to respond but to understand. It means making eye contact. It means asking questions because you're genuinely curious, not because you're trying to be polite. It means showing up consistently, reliably, in ways that make people feel they can count on you. Second, it means paying attention to the emotional temperature of your interactions. After you spend time with someone, how do they feel? Energized or drained? Valued or judged? Safe or anxious? If you're consistently leaving people feeling negative emotions, it doesn't matter how correct your words were or how helpful your advice was. They won't want to be around you. Third, it means understanding that small moments of emotional connection often matter more than grand gestures. The way you greet someone. The interest you show in their day. The acknowledgement you give their struggles. The celebration you offer their wins. These small moments accumulate into an overall feeling about you, and that feeling determines the quality and longevity of the relationship. Fourth, it means being authentic in how you show up. People can sense when you're performing, when you're putting on a mask, when you're saying what you think you should say rather than what you genuinely mean. That performance, even if it's technically correct, creates a feeling of distance and inauthenticity. Being genuine, even if imperfect, creates a feeling of trust and connection. The challenge is that creating positive emotional experiences requires emotional intelligence and genuine care. It requires actually being present and engaged, actually caring about the other person's experience, actually wanting them to feel good. You can't fake this consistently. People will sense it. But when you develop this capacity, when you become someone who consistently makes others feel valued and safe, you become someone unforgettable. You become the person others think of when they need support. The person whose presence brings comfort. The person who makes them feel good about themselves. And here's the beautiful part, when you focus on making others feel valued and seen, something wonderful happens to you too. You start feeling more connected, more purposeful, more alive. Because humans are wired for connection, and genuine connection, the kind that creates positive emotional experiences for both people, is one of the deepest sources of meaning and satisfaction in life. So remember, in every interaction, you're creating an emotional experience. You're making someone feel something. And that feeling, more than anything you say or do, is what they'll carry with them long after the interaction is over. Choose wisely what feelings you want to create. Fact number 10, hidden emotions become stronger. Here's a crucial truth about emotions that many people learn too late: the more you hide your feelings, the more intense they become. Emotions don't just disappear because you ignore them. They don't evaporate because you pretend they don't exist. They build. They fester. They accumulate pressure like water behind a dam. And they find other ways out. If you're someone who prides yourself on staying calm, on never showing weakness, on always keeping it together, I need you to hear this carefully: that control comes at a cost. A significant cost that you might not even be aware you're paying. Suppressed emotions don't vanish. They transform. They turn into anxiety that seems to come from nowhere. They become physical pain, headaches, stomach aches, muscle tension, chronic fatigue. They emerge as explosive outbursts over small things. They manifest as chronic numbness, a feeling of being disconnected from yourself and others. They show up as depression, a sense that nothing really matters because you've shut down feeling so completely that you can't feel joy either. Your body keeps the score even when your mind tries to forget. This isn't just a saying, it's neuroscience. When you experience an emotion but don't process it, don't express it, don't allow it to move through you, the emotional energy gets stored in your body. It affects your nervous system, your hormones, your muscle memory, your immune system. This is why people who seem like they have everything under control sometimes collapse out of nowhere. The seemingly stable person who has a breakdown. The always calm individual who suddenly explodes in rage. The strong, stoic person who develops chronic health issues. It's not sudden. It's been building for years, maybe decades. It's just that no one, including them, saw it coming because they were so skilled at hiding, so practiced at suppression. Let me explain what happens when you suppress emotions repeatedly. Let's say something happens that makes you angry. Instead of acknowledging and expressing the anger in a healthy way, you push it down. You tell yourself, I shouldn't feel this way, or getting angry won't help, or I need to stay professional/calm/mature. The anger doesn't go away just because you decided not to feel it. It goes underground. The next time something makes you angry, you do the same thing. And the next time. And the next. Each suppressed angry feeling joins the others in this internal reservoir of unprocessed emotion. Eventually, that reservoir is full. And then, one day, something relatively small happens: someone cuts you off in traffic, someone makes a minor comment, something doesn't go as planned, and suddenly you're experiencing rage that seems completely disproportionate to the situation. Everyone around you thinks you're overreacting. You might think you're overreacting too. But you're not. You're having a completely reasonable response to the accumulated anger of hundreds of suppressed incidents. It's just all coming out at once because the dam finally broke. The same thing happens with sadness, fear, hurt, disappointment, shame. Any emotion you habitually suppress will accumulate and eventually emerge in ways you can't control. Where does this pattern of suppression come from? Almost always from childhood. Children are naturally emotionally expressive. They cry when sad, yell when angry, and jump when excited. But many of us were taught that emotions are bad, embarrassing, or dangerous. Maybe you were told, stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Maybe you were sent to your room when you got angry. Maybe your parents were uncomfortable with emotions and dismissed yours with, you're fine, stop being dramatic. Maybe you were taught that boys don't cry or girls don't get angry. Maybe expressing emotions led to punishment, rejection, or being made fun of. So you learned to hide. You learned that showing how you really feel will get you hurt. And that pattern, learned in childhood as a survival strategy, became automatic in adulthood even though you're no longer in that environment. The problem is that emotions are information. They're your body's way of telling you something important. Anger tells you a boundary was crossed. Sadness tells you something matters to you and you've experienced a loss. Fear tells you to be careful. Joy tells you what brings meaning. Disgust tells you what to avoid. When you suppress emotions, you're essentially telling your body, I don't want this information. But your body keeps sending it because it's important. So it sends it louder. And louder. Until it's so loud you can't ignore it anymore. The alternative isn't to be emotionally uncontrolled, constantly expressing every feeling in every moment. That's not healthy either. The alternative is to develop emotional awareness and healthy expression. This means first acknowledging to yourself what you're feeling. Not judging it, not trying to change it, and just noticing it. I'm feeling angry right now. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling scared. Then, allowing yourself to feel it. This is the hardest part for people who've spent years suppressing. It means sitting with the uncomfortable feeling, letting it be there without immediately trying to make it go away. Finally, expressing it in healthy ways. This might mean talking to someone you trust about how you feel. It might mean journaling. It might mean physical release like crying, exercise, or even just breathing deeply and consciously relaxing the muscles where you hold tension. It might mean setting a boundary or having a difficult conversation. The key is that emotions need to move through you, not stay trapped inside you. The word emotion literally comes from Latin meaning to move out. Emotions are meant to be felt, processed, and released. When you block that natural process, you create problems. People who seem the most emotionally healthy aren't the ones who never feel anything difficult. They're the ones who let themselves feel everything, the full spectrum of human emotions, and process it instead of buying it. They cry when they need to cry. They express anger in appropriate ways. They admit when they're scared or hurt. They let themselves feel joy fully without holding back. This vulnerability, this emotional honesty, is actually the foundation of resilience and mental health. The people who can feel their emotions fully are the ones who bounce back from difficulties, who maintain genuine connections, who don't carry decades of unprocessed pain in their bodies. So if you've been taught that emotions are weakness, that vulnerability is dangerous, that showing how you really feel will get you hurt, please know that the real danger is in holding everything in until you break. The real weakness is being so afraid of your own feelings that you have to suppress them constantly. Your emotions aren't your enemy. They're messengers. And when you learn to listen to them, acknowledge them, and express them healthily, you'll find that they're not as scary or overwhelming as you thought. They come, they deliver their message, and then they pass. But only if you let them. Fact number 11, your brain's negativity bias. Here's something that might challenge how you see yourself and explain a lot about why your mind works the way it does. Your brain is wired to notice the negative more than the positive. This isn't a personal flaw or a sign that something's wrong with you. It's a survival mechanism left over from our evolutionary past, and it's called negativity bias. Our ancestors who paid more attention to threats, who remembered dangerous situations, who stayed hypervigilant, were the ones who survived. Think about it from an evolutionary perspective. If you lived in an environment where predators could attack at any moment, where poisonous plants could kill you, where rival tribes could be hostile, what mindset would keep you alive? The person who focused on the positive, who noticed the beautiful sunset, who appreciated the good meal, who remembered the peaceful days, but who overlooked the threat of the predator hiding in the grass. That person didn't survive long enough to pass on their genes. But the person who was always scanning for danger, who remembered every threatening situation in vivid detail, who assumed the worst and prepared for it. That person survived. And we're their descendants. We inherited their brains, their wiring, their bias toward noticing and remembering the negative. So your brain is literally designed to focus on what's wrong, what could go wrong, and what went wrong in the past. It's trying to keep you safe by making sure you never forget dangers and always prepare for threats. This is why you can receive 10 compliments and 1 criticism, and the criticism is the thing that keeps you awake at night. Your brain barely registers the compliments, they're nice, but not important from a survival perspective. But that 1 criticism? Your brain fixates on it, analyzes it, and replays it, because it's categorizing it as important threat information. This is why you remember embarrassing moments from years ago in vivid detail, that time you tripped in front of everyone, that awkward thing you said at a party, that presentation that didn't go well. Your brain flagged these as socially threatening situations and stored them in high-definition memory so you could avoid similar situations in the future. But positive moments? The times things went well? Unless they were extraordinary, your brain just files them away as no threat detected and moves on. You might have had 100 good interactions, but you barely remember them. 1 bad interaction, though? That sticks. This negativity bias shows up in countless ways in daily life. You focus more on your perceived flaws than your strengths. You remember failures more clearly than successes. You worry more about potential problems than you anticipate positive outcomes. You give more weight to negative feedback than positive feedback. You notice what's missing or wrong more than what's present and right. You are more motivated to avoid pain than to pursue pleasure. This bias affects your relationships too. Research shows that it takes approximately 5 positive interactions to counterbalance 1 negative interaction. Think about that. 1 argument, 1 harsh word, 1 moment of rejection requires 5 positive experiences to even out its emotional impact. In the modern world, where most threats aren't life or death, this negativity bias just makes you anxious, self-critical, and unable to fully enjoy the good things in your life. You're constantly scanning for threats that don't exist. You're preparing for disasters that probably won't happen. You're protecting yourself from dangers that are imagined rather than real. Your brain thinks it's protecting you by constantly focusing on the negative. But what it's actually doing is keeping you in a state of chronic stress and preventing you from experiencing joy, satisfaction, and peace. Understanding this bias is crucial because it helps you realize that your negative thoughts aren't the truth about reality. They're just your brain doing what it was programmed to do thousands of years ago. When you think everyone probably thinks I'm stupid, or this is going to go terribly, or I always mess everything up, that's not objective reality. That's negativity bias. So how do you work with this bias rather than being controlled by it? First, awareness. Simply knowing that your brain has this bias helps you take your negative thoughts less seriously. When you notice yourself fixating on something negative, you can recognize, oh, that's my negativity bias at work, rather than accepting those thoughts as truth. Second, actively counterbalance the bias. This is where practices like gratitude come in. Not because gratitude is some magical cure-all, but because it's one way to consciously direct your attention toward positive aspects of your life that your brain naturally overlooks. When you intentionally notice and appreciate good things, the meal you enjoyed, the friend who made you laugh, the comfortable bed you sleep in, the fact that you're healthy today, you're training your brain to give appropriate weight to positive experiences instead of dismissing them. Third, challenge negative thoughts. When your brain offers a negative interpretation, ask yourself, is this the only way to see this situation? What else might be true? Am I catastrophizing? Am I assuming the worst? Often, you'll realize your brain is jumping to negative conclusions that aren't supported by evidence. Fourth, celebrate and acknowledge positive experiences when they happen. Your brain wants to move past them quickly, but you can consciously pause and let them sink in. When something good happens, take a moment to really feel it, to notice it, to appreciate it. This helps create stronger neural pathways for positive experiences. Fifth, be compassionate with yourself about having this bias. You're not being negative on purpose. You're not choosing to be anxious or critical. Your brain is doing what evolution designed it to do. And with conscious effort, you can learn to work with your brain's natural tendencies rather than being completely controlled by them. The goal isn't to become unrealistically positive or to ignore genuine problems. The goal is balance, seeing reality accurately, which includes both the challenges and the good things, rather than having your perception skewed entirely toward the negative. Remember, your negative thoughts are loud not because they're true, but because your brain has a megaphone pointed at them. The positive thoughts are there too, but they're whispering. Learning to turn down the volume on automatic negativity and turn up the volume on realistic, balanced thinking is one of the most valuable skills you can develop. Fact number 12, introversion versus extroversion, understanding your energy source. Let's talk about introversion and extroversion because these terms get misunderstood constantly, and understanding them properly can completely change how you see yourself and others. Here's the truth: introverts don't hate people. They just recharge alone, while extroverts recharge around others. This isn't about being shy versus outgoing. It's not about whether you can speak in public or enjoy social situations. It's about where you get your energy from, about what drains you and what fills you back up. An introvert can be incredibly social, can love being around people, can be the life of the party. But after a few hours, even if they're having fun, they need to retreat. They need to be alone, to be quiet, and to process everything that happened. Social interaction, even positive social interaction, costs them energy. And they recharge that energy through solitude. An extrovert, on the other hand, feels drained when they're alone too long. They need social interaction to feel alive, to feel energized, and to feel like themselves. Being alone too much leaves them feeling flat, bored, and restless. They recharge through connection with others. Neither is better or worse. They're just different operating systems. But here's where it gets complicated. If you're an introvert who grew up in a family or culture that values extroversion, you probably spent your whole life feeling like something was wrong with you. Think about how our society talks about personality. We praise people who are outgoing, sociable, the ones who light up a room. We describe ideal employees as team players who thrive in collaborative environments. We encourage children to make lots of friends and worry if they prefer playing alone. Extroversion is seen as the standard, the goal, the healthy way to be. So if you're an introvert, you got the message early on that your natural tendencies were wrong. You tried to force yourself to be more social, more outgoing, and more energetic. You pushed through exhaustion to attend events you didn't want to go to. You felt guilty for wanting to stay home. You wondered why you couldn't just be like everyone else, why being around people exhausted you so much when it seemed to energize everyone else. And you probably internalized shame about your introversion. You told yourself you were antisocial, boring, and not fun enough. You judged yourself for needing alone time. You forced yourself into social situations to prove you weren't too introverted, and then felt even more exhausted and confused about why it was so hard. Or maybe you're an extrovert who was told to be quiet, to stop seeking attention, to tone it down, to be more serious and introspective. Maybe your natural energy and need for social connection was labeled as too much or attention-seeking. Maybe you were made to feel guilty for not being content in solitude. So you learned to suppress your natural need for connection and validation, and now you feel unfulfilled but don't know why. Both situations are forms of self-betrayal. Both lead to chronic dissatisfaction because you're trying to be someone you're not. You're fighting against your fundamental nature instead of honoring it. The healthiest thing you can do is figure out where you fall on the introversion-extroversion spectrum and honor that, even if it disappoints the people around you. If you're an introvert, this means recognizing that you need alone time to recharge, and that's not selfish or antisocial. Setting boundaries around social commitments rather than saying yes to everything. Creating space in your schedule for solitude, especially after draining social events. Choosing quality over quantity in relationships, a few deep friendships rather than many surface-level ones. Not forcing yourself to be on all the time or to match extroverts' energy levels. Understanding that your preference for depth over breadth is valuable, not deficient. If you're an extrovert, this means recognizing that you need social interaction to feel good, and that's not needy or attention-seeking. Actively creating opportunities for connection rather than waiting for them to happen. Understanding that your energy might overwhelm introverts, and respecting their need for space. Finding healthy outlets for your social energy rather than suppressing it. Not judging yourself for feeling flat or restless when you've been alone too long. Understanding that your ability to energize and engage others is valuable, not exhausting. It's also important to understand that introversion and extroversion exist on a spectrum. Most people aren't purely one or the other. You might be an introvert who still enjoys social situations in the right context. You might be an extrovert who still needs occasional solitude. The key is understanding your natural tendencies and working with them rather than against them. One of the biggest relationship challenges happens when introverts and extroverts don't understand each other. An extrovert might interpret an introvert's need for alone time as rejection or lack of interest. An introvert might interpret an extrovert's constant need for activity as exhausting or superficial. But when both people understand that these are just different ways of recharging, they can respect each other's needs without taking them personally. The broader lesson here is about self-acceptance and authenticity. So much suffering comes from trying to be something you're not, from judging your natural tendencies as wrong or deficient. When you can say, "This is how I'm wired," and that's okay, you free yourself from constant internal conflict. You stop forcing yourself to attend every social event. You stop feeling guilty for wanting to stay home. You stop judging yourself as broken for not matching some imaginary ideal. You start making choices that actually work for you, that honor your energy and your needs, even if they're different from what others expect. And here's what's beautiful: when you stop fighting your nature and start honoring it, you actually show up better in all areas of your life. Introverts who respect their need for solitude are more present and engaged when they do socialize. Extroverts who get enough social interaction are more focused and content when they need to work alone. The goal isn't to become more extroverted or more introverted. The goal is to understand yourself deeply, honor your authentic needs, and create a life that works with your nature rather than against it. Fact number 13: memory is reconstruction, not recording. Here's a fact about memory that changes everything you think you know about your past. Every time you recall a memory, you're not accessing the original experience. You're reconstructing it. And each time you reconstruct it, you change it slightly based on your current emotions, beliefs, and biases. This means your memories are not reliable recordings of the past. They're stories your brain tells you about the past, and those stories shift and change over time. Every time you remember something, you're essentially creating a new version of that memory, influenced by who you are now and what you need the memory to mean. This is hard to accept because our memories feel so real, so accurate. When you remember something vividly, it seems like you're replaying an exact recording of what happened. But that's an illusion. Your brain doesn't work like a video camera. It works more like a storyteller, piecing together fragments of information and filling in gaps based on expectations, emotions, and current understanding. Researchers have demonstrated this in countless studies. When people witness the same event, they remember it differently. When people are asked about the same childhood memory at different times in their lives, the details change. When people are given false information about a memory, they often incorporate that false information into their recollection, genuinely believing it was part of the original experience. This is why siblings can remember the same childhood event completely differently. One sibling remembers a family vacation as wonderful and bonding. Another remembers the same vacation as tense and uncomfortable. Both memories feel absolutely true to the person holding them. And in a sense, both are true. They're true to how each person experienced and later reconstructed that event. This is also why you might recall a past relationship as perfect or terrible depending on how it ended. If the relationship ended well, your brain tends to highlight the positive memories and downplay the problems. If it ended badly, your brain does the opposite, emphasizing what was wrong and minimizing what was good. The actual experiences haven't changed, but your memory of them has been reconstructed through the lens of the ending. Your brain is constantly editing your past to make sense of your present. If you've developed a belief that you were always anxious, your brain will search through your memories and highlight moments that confirm this belief while downplaying moments that contradict it. If you believe you came from a loving family, you'll remember the loving moments more clearly. If you believe your family was dysfunctional, you'll remember the difficult moments more clearly. This doesn't mean your experiences don't matter or that nothing is real. It means that the story you tell yourself about who you are, what happened to you, and why you are the way you are, that story is flexible. It's not set in stone. It can be questioned, examined, and even rewritten. This is actually incredibly empowering once you get past the initial discomfort of realizing your memories aren't as reliable as you thought. Because if the story you're telling yourself about your past is keeping you stuck, if it's a story of victimhood, of permanent damage, of "this is just how I am because of what happened," you have the power to examine that story and potentially reconstruct it. I'm not talking about denying real trauma or pretending difficult things didn't happen. I'm talking about recognizing that your interpretation of those events, the meaning you've assigned to them, the conclusions you've drawn about yourself based on them, all of that is flexible. For example, maybe you have a memory of your parents being critical and unsupportive. That memory might be accurate. But the story you've built around it, "I'm not good enough because my parents didn't support me," that's an interpretation, not a fact. You could also construct a story like, "My parents did the best they could with their own limitations, and I've learned to support myself." Same memory, different story, completely different impact on your life. This is the foundation of many therapeutic approaches. When you work with a good therapist, you're not changing what happened. You're changing your relationship to what happened, the story you tell about it, and the conclusions you draw from it. You can't change the past, but you can change how you remember and interpret the past. And that change in interpretation can free you from patterns and beliefs that have kept you stuck for years. This also means being humble about your certainty regarding your memories, especially in conflicts with others. When you're absolutely certain you remember something one way and someone else remembers it completely differently, both of you might be genuinely recalling your best reconstruction of events. Neither of you is necessarily lying. You're both working with memories that have been reconstructed multiple times and influenced by different perspectives and emotions. Understanding this can create more compassion in relationships and more flexibility in how you see yourself. You're not permanently defined by your past. Your past, as you remember and interpret it, is itself changeable. And when you recognize that, you open up the possibility of growth and transformation that seemed impossible when you believed your memories were fixed recordings of unchangeable truth. Fact number 14, the chameleon effect, mirroring body language. Let's talk about something you probably do without realizing it. You mirror the body language of people you like or feel connected to. This is called the chameleon effect, and it happens unconsciously as a fundamental part of human social bonding. When you're having a good conversation with someone, when you're comfortable, when you trust them, you start to match their posture, their gestures, their tone of voice, even their breathing rhythm. If they lean forward, you lean forward. If they cross their arms, you cross your arms. If they speak slowly and calmly, you adjust your speech pattern to match. If they're animated, you become more animated. You don't decide to do this. You're not consciously trying to copy them. It just happens naturally because this mirroring is one of the fundamental ways humans build rapport and signal that they're on the same wavelength. This behavior starts extremely early in human development. Watch a mother and baby interact, and you'll see perfect synchrony. When the baby smiles, the mother smiles. When the baby coos, the mother coos back. This early mirroring is how we learn that we're connected to others, that our actions affect others, that we're part of a social world. As adults, we continue this behavior automatically. And it serves important social functions. When someone mirrors you, it sends a subconscious signal: I'm like you. I understand you. We're connected. This creates comfort, trust, and liking. Research shows that people who are subtly mirrored during conversations rate the interaction more positively and feel more warmth toward the other person, even though they don't consciously notice the mirroring happening. Salespeople and negotiators are sometimes trained to deliberately mirror as a technique to build rapport. But natural, unconscious mirroring is different from strategic mirroring. People can often sense when it's being done artificially or manipulatively, and it creates the opposite effect of disconnection and distrust. The flip side of this is also revealing. If someone isn't mirroring you, if their body language is closed off or completely out of sync with yours, it's often a sign that they're not fully present, not fully comfortable, or not fully invested in the connection. You've probably felt this, even if you couldn't articulate what was happening. That awkward feeling you get when a conversation isn't flowing, when something feels off even though everything seems fine on the surface, often, that's because the unconscious dance of mirroring and synchrony isn't happening. You're trying to connect, but the other person's body is saying, I'm not here with you. This might happen because they're distracted, stressed, uncomfortable, or simply not interested in connecting. And your body picks up on this absence of mirroring before your conscious mind does, creating that vague sense of, something's not right here. Understanding the chameleon effect can help you in several ways. First, you can use it as information in your relationships. When you notice easy, natural mirroring happening, it's a sign of genuine connection and comfort. When you notice its absence, it might be worth examining what's creating that disconnection. Second, you can be more aware of your own body language when you want to build connection. While you shouldn't force or fake mirroring, being open, present, and engaged naturally creates the conditions for this synchrony to emerge. Third, you can recognize that this is one of many subtle ways humans communicate beneath the level of words. We're constantly sending and receiving signals through body language, tone, facial expressions, and physical synchrony. Much of our communication happens in this nonverbal realm, and becoming more aware of it can deepen your understanding of social dynamics. The chameleon effect also reminds us that connection is a physical, embodied experience, not just a mental or emotional one. When you truly connect with someone, your bodies synchronize. You're literally getting on the same wavelength, coordinating your movements and energy in a dance that happens without conscious thought. This is part of why some people just click while others don't. When the natural mirroring and synchrony happen easily, connection feels effortless. When it doesn't happen, when you're constantly out of sync, connection feels forced and uncomfortable no matter how much you might want it intellectually. It's also worth noting that some neurodivergent individuals, particularly those on the autism spectrum, might not engage in this automatic mirroring in the same way. This can lead to misunderstandings where neurotypical people interpret the absence of mirroring as disinterest or disconnection when that's not the case at all. The person might be deeply engaged and interested but expressing it differently. The broader lesson is about the complexity of human communication and connection. We like to think that communication is primarily about words, about what we say. But the reality is that so much of our communication happens through these subtle, unconscious physical cues. We're social animals, wired to attune to each other in ways that go far beyond language. And the more aware you become of these deeper layers of communication, the more skillfully you can navigate relationships and understand your own social experiences. Fact number 15, happiness is fluctuating, not constant. Here's something about happiness that most people get fundamentally wrong: happiness isn't a constant state. It's a fluctuating experience. You're not supposed to be happy all the time. And believing you should be is actually making you less happy. The idea that you should always feel good, always be positive, always be grateful, is not only unrealistic, it's damaging. It creates this baseline expectation that if you're not happy, something must be wrong with you. And that expectation turns normal human emotions like sadness, frustration, or boredom into problems that need to be fixed. But those emotions aren't problems. They're information. They're part of the natural, healthy range of human experience. Sadness tells you that you've lost something that mattered, that you cared deeply about something, that you're processing grief or disappointment. Without sadness, you couldn't appreciate joy. Without the capacity to feel loss, you couldn't truly value connection. Frustration tells you that something isn't working and needs to change. It's a signal that you're hitting an obstacle, that your current approach isn't effective, that you need to problem solve or adjust your expectations. Frustration is often the emotion that precedes breakthrough and growth. Boredom tells you that you need more stimulation, more challenge, more meaning. It's your mind saying, "This isn't engaging enough for me." Boredom can be a signal that you're ready for something new, that you've outgrown a situation, that you need to stretch yourself. Fear tells you to be careful, to pay attention, to prepare for challenges. Healthy fear keeps you safe and motivates you to take precautions. When you allow yourself to feel the full range of human emotions without judging them as good or bad, you actually become more emotionally resilient, more present, more fully alive. You develop emotional flexibility, the ability to feel whatever arises, learn from it, and move through it, rather than getting stuck trying to force yourself to feel only positive emotions. The cultural pressure to be happy all the time is relatively new in human history. For most of human existence, people understood that life includes suffering, that difficult emotions are part of being human, that you can't have light without shadow. But modern consumer culture, positive psychology taken to extremes, and social media have created this narrative that happiness is the goal, that you should be able to achieve constant positive emotion if you just try hard enough, think positively enough, practice enough gratitude. This narrative is profitable for industries that sell happiness, self-help books, motivational speakers, mood-enhancing products, therapeutic services that promise to make you happy. But it's psychologically unhealthy because it pathologies normal emotional variation. When you expect to be happy all the time and you're not, you conclude something is wrong with you. You think, why can't I just be happy? What's wrong with me that I'm still feeling sad/anxious/angry? Why can't I get over this? And now, on top of whatever you were originally feeling, you're also feeling shame about feeling it. You're suffering about your suffering, which is often worse than the original emotion. This creates what psychologists call experiential avoidance, trying desperately to avoid, suppress, or escape from difficult emotions rather than experiencing them. And experiential avoidance is strongly linked to depression, anxiety, and numerous mental health issues. The more you fight your emotions, the more stuck you become. The alternative is acceptance, not resignation or giving up, but allowing whatever emotion is present to be there without fighting it. This doesn't mean wallowing in negative emotions or letting them control you. It means acknowledging them, feeling them, understanding what they're telling you, and then responding wisely rather than reactively. Here's what this looks like in practice. You feel sad about something. Instead of immediately trying to cheer yourself up, instead of judging yourself for feeling sad, instead of pretending you're fine, you simply acknowledge, "I'm sad right now." This makes sense given what happened. It's okay to feel sad. You might cry. You might need to be alone for a while. You might need to talk to someone. But you're not adding the extra layer of, "I shouldn't feel this way." The sadness comes, you feel it fully, you process it, and naturally, in its own time, it passes. Because emotions do pass. They're temporary states, not permanent conditions. When you allow them to move through you, they complete their cycle and move on. When you fight them, they stick around longer, intensify, and cause more problems. The goal isn't to be happy all the time. The goal is to be real all the time, fully present with whatever your authentic experience is in any given moment. Sometimes that's happiness. Sometimes that's contentment. Sometimes that's excitement. And sometimes that's sadness, frustration, anxiety, or anger. And all of it is okay. All of it is part of being fully human. When you stop trying to force constant happiness and start accepting the full spectrum of emotional experience, something paradoxical happens. You actually feel better overall. You're less anxious because you're not constantly monitoring your emotional state and panicking when you don't feel happy. You're less depressed because you're not constantly judging yourself as failing at life when you feel down. You're more present because you're not always trying to be somewhere other than where you are emotionally. And the happy moments, when they come, feel richer and more precious because you're not taking them for granted or expecting them to last forever. You appreciate them fully while they're here, knowing they're part of the natural ebb and flow of emotional life. So give yourself permission to feel whatever you feel. Stop trying to be happy all the time. Stop judging your difficult emotions as evidence that something's wrong with you. They're not. They're just part of being alive, being human, being real. Fact number 16, nervousness and body temperature. Here's something physical that explains a sensation you've probably experienced many times. When you're nervous, your body temperature drops, which is why people often feel cold before a big event. Before public speaking, before a job interview, before an important meeting, before a first date, that cold, shaky feeling isn't random. It's your body's ancient emergency response system kicking in. Your body is redirecting blood flow away from your extremities and toward your vital organs, preparing for a potential threat even though that threat is actually just public speaking or meeting someone new. This is part of the fight-or-flight response, a survival mechanism that served our ancestors well when they faced actual physical dangers. When your sympathetic nervous system activates, it prioritizes keeping your core safe. Blood vessels in your hands, feet, and skin constrict, sending more blood to your heart, lungs, and major muscle groups. This is why your hands might feel cold and clammy, why you might shiver even though the room isn't cold, why you might feel that overall sense of being chilled. At the same time, your heart rate increases, your breathing becomes more rapid and shallow, you might start sweating, even while feeling cold, your muscles tense up, and your digestive system slows down. Hello, nervous stomach. Your body is preparing you to fight or run from danger, except the danger is not a predator trying to eat you, it's a room full of people watching you give a presentation. This mismatch between your body's response system and modern stressors is at the heart of why anxiety feels so overwhelming and confusing. Your body is treating a job interview like a life-or-death emergency, pumping out stress hormones and preparing for physical combat, when really you just need to sit calmly and answer questions. Understanding this helps tremendously when you're in those moments of intense nervousness. That cold, shaky, nauseous feeling isn't a sign that you're weak or that something is fundamentally wrong with you. It's your ancient survival system trying to protect you the only way it knows how, by preparing your body for physical danger. The problem is that your nervous system can't distinguish between actual physical threats and psychological or social threats. Your body reacts the same way whether you're being chased by a wild animal or giving a toast at a wedding. The response is the same: activate emergency protocols, prioritize survival. But here's the good news: once you understand what's happening, you can work with your nervous system rather than against it. You can send signals to your body that you're safe, that this moment isn't actually life or death, that the emergency response isn't necessary. Deep breathing is one of the most effective tools because it directly communicates with your nervous system. When you're in danger, your breathing becomes rapid and shallow to prepare for action. When you're safe and relaxed, your breathing is slow and deep. By consciously slowing your breathing, you're essentially telling your nervous system, false alarm. We're safe. Stand down. Try this: breathe in slowly for a count of 4, hold for 4, and breathe out slowly for a count of 6. The longer exhale is key. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system, and counters the fight-or-flight response. Grounding techniques also help. These are ways to bring your attention to the present moment and to physical sensations that contradict the danger signal. Feel your feet on the floor. Notice 5 things you can see. Focus on the texture of your clothes against your skin. These actions shift your brain away from threat scanning and toward present moment awareness. Self-compassion is crucial too. Instead of judging yourself for being nervous, why am I so anxious? Everyone else seems fine. What's wrong with me? You can acknowledge your nervousness with kindness. My body is trying to protect me right now. This is uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. I'm okay. Physical warmth can also help. Wrapping yourself in a blanket, holding a warm cup, taking a warm shower, these can counteract the cold feeling and signal safety to your body. And perhaps most importantly, accept that some nervousness is normal and even helpful. A moderate level of nervous energy actually improves performance. It sharpens your focus, boosts your energy, and heightens your alertness. The goal isn't to eliminate nervousness completely. The goal is to keep it at a manageable level where it energizes rather than paralyzes you. Athletes understand this well. They don't try to be completely calm before competition. They channel their nervous energy into focus and performance. They reframe the physical sensations of nervousness as excitement, and interestingly, nervousness and excitement have very similar physical manifestations. The difference is mostly in how you interpret the sensations. So the next time you feel that cold, nervous sensation before an important event, remember, it's not a sign of weakness or that you can't handle the situation. It's just your ancient survival system doing its best to keep you safe. Thank it for trying to protect you, then gently remind your body that you're safe and redirect that nervous energy toward the. Fact number 17, intelligent people and overthinking. Here's something about intelligence that's often overlooked and might explain a lot about your inner experience. Highly intelligent people tend to overthink everything. If you're someone whose mind never stops, who analyzes every conversation, every decision, every possible outcome, who lies awake at night replaying things that happened years ago, you're not broken or neurotic. Your brain is just wired to process more information, to see more possibilities, to consider more angles than the average person. Intelligence means your brain has the capacity to think deeply, to make complex connections, to analyze situations from multiple perspectives, to anticipate outcomes based on various factors. These are valuable cognitive abilities. But they come with a significant downside: you can't turn them off. When most people finish a conversation, they move on. When you finish a conversation, your brain replays it. Why did I say that? What did they mean by that comment? Did I come across wrong? What should I have said instead? You analyze tone, word choice, body language, implications, and possible misunderstandings. When most people face a decision, they consider a few options and choose. When you face a decision, your brain generates dozens of possibilities. But what if this happens? Or what if that happens? What if I regret this? What if there's an option I haven't thought of? What if I'm missing crucial information? You see every potential outcome, every possible failure, every way things could go wrong. When most people experience a mistake or embarrassment, they feel bad for a while and then forget about it. When you experience the same thing, your brain files it away in high-definition detail and randomly brings it up at 2 a.m. for the next several years, replaying it from every angle and generating new layers of analysis each time. This isn't just being anxious, though overthinking and anxiety are often connected. This is your brain's high processing capacity working overtime, unable to settle on simple conclusions, always finding new layers to examine, new connections to explore, new what-ifs to consider. And here's where it gets particularly challenging: the more intelligent you are, the more convincing your anxious thoughts become. You're skilled at logical reasoning, so you can construct elaborate, seemingly rational arguments for why things will go badly. You can logic your way into any fear. You can build an ironclad case for why you should worry. Someone might tell you, stop overthinking it, but you can't just stop. Your brain is built to think deeply. Telling you not to overthink is like telling someone not to hear when there's a loud noise. It's not a matter of willpower or choice, it's how your brain fundamentally operates. Moreover, your ability to see all the possibilities and potential problems means you're often preparing for worst-case scenarios that never materialize. You spend enormous mental energy worrying about and planning for things that, statistically, probably won't happen. But your brain insists it's necessary to be prepared for every contingency. This creates chronic mental exhaustion. Your brain never gets a break. Even when you're supposedly relaxing, your mind is churning, analyzing, planning, reviewing, and anticipating. You're always 3 steps ahead, which means you're rarely fully present in the current moment. Other people might seem more carefree, more able to just let things go and enjoy themselves. And you might wonder what's wrong with you that you can't do the same. But there's nothing wrong with you. You simply have a different cognitive setup, one that's capable of deep analysis but that struggles to disengage from that analysis. The challenge isn't to stop thinking, that's impossible and probably not even desirable. The challenge is to learn when thinking is helpful and when it's just spinning you in circles. It's to develop the wisdom to recognize the difference between productive problem-solving and unproductive rumination. Productive thinking moves you forward. It generates new insights, solutions, understanding. It has a purpose and an endpoint. When you finish thinking something through productively, you have clarity and can move to action. Unproductive rumination keeps you stuck. It circles around the same thoughts repeatedly without generating new insights. It's thinking about things you can't change, analyzing situations that are already over, and worrying about things outside your control. It has no endpoint. You could ruminate forever and never reach resolution. Learning to distinguish between these and to consciously redirect from rumination to more helpful mental activities is crucial. Sometimes this means deliberately engaging your brain in something else: reading, puzzles, creative work, and exercise. Sometimes it means meditation or mindfulness practices that teach you to observe thoughts without getting pulled into them. Sometimes it means journaling to get the thoughts out of your head and onto paper where you can see them more objectively. It also helps to remember that thinking isn't always the answer. Sometimes you need to trust your gut, make a decision based on limited information, take action before you have perfect clarity. This is uncomfortable for overthinkers because it goes against your instinct to analyze everything thoroughly. But life often requires action in ambiguity, decisions without complete information. The goal isn't to become less intelligent or to dull your analytical capacities. The goal is to develop executive control over your thinking, to be able to engage deep analysis when it serves you and to disengage from it when it doesn't. To think deeply when there's something worth thinking about, and to let go when continued thinking is just generating anxiety without adding value. This is a lifelong practice, not something you master once and forever. Your brilliant, active mind will always want to analyze and anticipate. But you can get better at recognizing when it's being helpful versus when it's just torturing you with scenarios that probably won't happen. And remember, your overthinking mind, as exhausting as it can be, is also the source of your insights, your creativity, and your ability to solve complex problems. The same brain that keeps you up at night worrying is the brain that makes brilliant connections, generates innovative solutions, and understands things deeply. It's a package deal. The work is learning to harness the gifts while managing the challenges. The task at hand.